the recording. Okay, so we are on Unit 5, and the topic is project planning. So in this study unit, three fundamentals, that is project planning, schedule, and cost estimation of project management are discussed. In terms of cost estimation, the fundamentals of software costing and the factors which affect the price of a software are looked into and discussed in detail. And then we also talk about the COCOMO model, which stands for constructive cost modeling. Okay, it's a model for estimating the cost of software. So we will cover the following learning outcomes: have a thorough understanding of the fundamentals of software testing, and also to be able to analyze and evaluate various factors that affect the price of a software, which can be developed for external use. Demonstrates detailed knowledge of certain sections which must be included in a project plan, which would have been developed using the plan-driven development process. Have a thorough understanding of what is involved in project scheduling and the use of bar charts to present a project schedule. Demonstrates an understanding of how to use agile project planning based on the planning game, and have a thorough understanding of the cost estimation techniques and how COCOMO 2 model can be used for software cost estimation. So what is a project plan? If we reflect back to the previous study unit we did, one of the duties, which in Unit 4 was project management, but one of the duties of a person called a project manager is to draft a project plan. Okay, and we said the initial project plan is also referred to as a proposal because they're proposing to the client how they plan on doing the project. Okay, so a project plan is created at the beginning of a project and later updated as the project progresses. Now, we also need to take into consideration that you could either be functioning with two approaches, the one which you call the plan-driven one, the predictive approach, or you could be taking the adaptive approach. And we know that when you choose the agile one, then you're more subject to, the document is subject to more changes than the plan-driven approach. Okay, so team leaders or managers use the project plan to support their decision making about budgeting and project staffing. So this document outlines almost everything you need to start the project, and it defines also how much resources you are working with and who are those resources in terms of people, in terms of staffing. So it definitely supports the team leaders into making their decisions. They don't just make them spontaneously, okay? It improves the whole process of management when things are well documented and they're on paper. It can be used as a way of measuring the progress of the project. Okay, so you need to measure your progress against something. Okay, you can't just be ad hoc and say we're satisfied with our progress. You need to measure it. You set a goal, and then you deliver, and then you measure against the goal whether you actually met the objective. It can be used as a way of measuring the progress of the project, contain detailed requirements of the system to be developed. So most of the people tend to think that this is the only thing that is there. It's all about the requirements, but it's just, the requirements are just a section of the actual project plan document. There's a lot of other things that it contains. So we have these different stages at which the planning is done. The planning is done initially when we're initiating the project, which I said in the previous slides, it's referred to as a proposal. So at the proposal stage, we do planning. During the project startup phase, when you have to plan who will work on the project, how the project will be broken down into increments, how resources will be allocated across your company. Okay, so you do it at proposal stage, you do it at the project startup phase or the initiation phase. Okay, And then you also do it periodically throughout the project. When you modify your plan in the light of experience gained and information from monitoring the progress of the work. Okay, so this project plan document is very important for people who chose to go with the plan-driven approach, okay, or plan-driven development. And it says it is an approach to software engineering where the requirements are known and the development process is planned in detail, and we cannot backtrack, so we need everything documented and everybody on the same page. There's little room for mistakes. And most people think that plan-driven approach is a traditional way of managing large software development projects, which is not hard to understand why. If you think about it carefully, you may think that for large complex projects, people are going to do a lot of documentation. They're going to have a lot of meetings because of the nature of the project, but it's actually the opposite way. For the plan-driven project or the plan-driven approach, we use as much documentation as we can because there's little room for error and you want everything formalized. But with large projects, we understand that we're leaving room for error and there's going to be errors along the way. So we don't focus a lot on the documentation side of things. So most people tend to think of it that way. The traditional way of managing large projects is just to do a lot of planning and documentation. So what does it contain, or what does this project plan really address? During the planning phase, cost estimations can be drawn up and the software cost should be calculated objectively, okay? So you must be able to do itemized billing, okay? This is how much this item will cost. This is how much time this particular person's hours will cost us. There are 3 parameters which must be considered during the software cost estimation, namely effort cost, that is cost of paying IT specialist, hardware and software cost, traveling and training costs. Okay, so in the next slide, we're just going to talk about one individually. So when you're talking about effort costs, you're paying people for working on the project, and we normally say effort is equal to person hours. So it's basically how much effort the person is putting in is how much you pay them. It's measured in person hours and you pay them per hour to work on the project. So that's one of the factors that you need to consider when you are pricing your software. How much are we going to pay the developers or the IT specialist rather? Then the next thing that influences the cost of a software project is the hardware cost. Are we going to be buying any additional hardware? Sometimes you're not going to be buying any new hardware because the organization may already have the infrastructure in place. But on certain occasions, you may need to start from scratch and buy additional hardware, okay? So how much will it cost for us to purchase the relevant hardware? And then the next one is software cost. How much the necessary software should cost? And maybe you're going to be doing a reuse of components. So you're going to be reusing some other applications or whatever objects. That's going to be considered as software costs that you're going to be buying, okay? Traveling costs, if people need to travel, if they're working on the same project and they need to travel to different locations, okay? Take a flight from here to another city, another province, how much, you know, that needs to be taken into account. They're not going to be paying for that for themselves because they're traveling for business purposes. And training costs, as soon as it's released, users need to be trained on how to use the software, okay? So as part of launching the project, you need to facilitate training workshops. And obviously it's something, booking a venue, there's other catering things that you may need to do, and money needs to be paid for all of those things. So all of these details need to be there. And when you don't cheat yourself out when you estimating the cost of the software. Take all of these things into consideration. Also include how much profit you need to gain from the process. So the price of a software can be calculated by looking into the development cost and the profit for the developer. Calculating development costs, one has to consider the following issues: business, organizational, economical, and political. Also, risk and the type of contract must be taken into consideration, since all these mentioned issues may affect the software pricing, thereby making the price to be adjusted upwards or downwards. Okay, so also it's very important that you need to consider other factors, external factors to the organization that will force you to build a software in a particular way in terms of compliance. So you have to be compliant, and that will add additional costs. The contract, the type of contract, you don't want to promise to develop a agile project for a fixed amount, because you know that these things are subject to change. So build them in a flexible manner where you tell them that it's fine. You may add changes, but as you add changes, you're also going to increase the cost associated with producing this project, with this product. Because remember, the whole reason why the development company is here and is part of the project, because they want to make a profit. So you don't want to cheat yourself or shoot yourself in the foot. Whatever you do, it must be enough to cover your costs, plus add a bit of margins so that you gain profit from the process. Factors that affect the pricing of software. So contractual terms. If a customer does not want to want the source code, then the price of the software must be reduced so as to reflect the value of the source code. So if a particular company says, okay, do the project for us, then deploy it to the production environment, but we don't need you to give us the source code. We don't want the source code. Then obviously you need to reduce your cost. You can't be charging them yet the source code remains, or the intellectual property of this software remains by you. Okay, and then cost estimation uncertainty. If the cost estimation is not known in an organization, there may be a need for increasing their price above its normal profits. Okay, and this goes back to what I said about agility. So if you know that this type of project is complex, it's large, and using agile principles, then you need to price it slightly above the normal, okay? So that you're able to cover, and so when there is change, it still covers your cost and you still make some sort of profit. And financial health. If a company has financial problems, they may lower their price so as to win a contract. So you find that companies that are actually service providers, software service providers, they may need to, because of the financial hardships that they may be experiencing at the time, maybe there isn't much business coming in. So they may need to, or be pressured to lower their prices to get the contracts from the company that needs the services rendered. Market opportunity. If a development organization wishes to enter a new market, they may lower their prices as a way of attracting customers. And this is what we call a differentiator strategy. So you're entering a new market, and you see that, I mean, there are already other organizations that are doing the same thing as you. Okay, maybe you want to start a mobile app development company. There's already other companies doing that. So what would make the customers come to you? Because if I want a service rendered, I'll go to the company with experience. So if you are also in the same industry, what makes you different? What would make me come to you rather than the other company? Then you can differentiate in terms of making your prices lower, okay? And you can attract customers that way. And requirements volatility. In scenarios where requirements change, a developing company may charge high prices to effect the changes into a system. Okay, so yes, it actually ties in also to the second point, dynamic requirements. So there's this concept which we call pricing to win. And I'm not sure if it's ethical or unethical, but people do it a lot. So pricing to win is a concept whereby the development company has an idea of how much the customer is willing to pay and then makes a bid for the contract based on the customer's expectations. So pricing to win, in order for you to do it effectively, you need some intel, some inside information. So somebody must give you some insight as to how the company that needs the customer or the client, what are their financial status and how much will they be willing to pay for this project? Because companies that want you to propose a system don't necessarily tell you how much they're working with. They want you to propose how much you're going to do it for. Okay. No particular party, no particular party would want to reveal how much they're working with, because you stand to win if somebody proposes to do it for a lower price. So if you have someone in the organization who can tell you, it sounds a bit unethical, but people do it all the time. Say, no, this company would be willing to pay X, Y, Z for this particular software. And then you, as the service provider, you propose the exact same amount. Surely you that way, and you met it at the exact point because you won the contract, but also you want the maximum amount of profit that you can get from that particular organization. So pricing to win looks unethical and unbusinesslike, but it is an advantage to the system provider and the customer. It is an advantage since the customer will get the expected system at an affordable price, and the system provider will only develop software which meets the customer's needs. I think somewhere along the line it makes good business sense, but obviously you need that inside information. So what of the context covered by this project plan? The work, it covers the work to be done, who is responsible for the work, the duration of the particular task or project, products of the completed work, okay? And this is just a more detailed outline of what you're most likely to see in the document that's titled project plan, okay? It's going to be introduction, which is outlining why or the background or the context in which this project is being established, the project organization, who are the project team, okay? Who are the project team? Your risk analysis, we mentioned why risk analysis is important in the previous in the previous presentation or previous study unit. The hardware and software resources required, okay? The work breakdown, the scheduling of work activities or tasks, and monitoring and reporting mechanisms. So all of these points will be there, and they are expanded extensively, okay, into subsections. So what are the disadvantages of working with the project plan? And so one of the disadvantages of using the plan-driven development is that early decisions have to be revised since the environment in which the software is to be developed may change. However, early planning allows organizational issues to be taken into account during software development. Any potential risks or problems are discovered and identified early before the project starts, okay? So basically what it's saying here that planning a project is an iterative process, and the plan changes are inevitable since the more information you get, the more there is a need to revise the plan so as to reflect the requirements and schedule and risk. Also, if business goals changes, this forces the project plan to change, okay? So it's an iterative process in that sense that you keep on refining it. And this is how the typical process would work. You need to do your initial investigation where you're looking at the boundaries, your constraints, you're identifying your risk, and you're identifying which particular deliverables or milestones you're going to set for yourself as the project team. Okay, so once you have those, because your deliverables are like your tasks and activities that need to be delivered. Okay, for example, you're organizing a concert. We need to set up the stage. We need to get the sound system, for example. Those will be the deliverables that you set for yourself. So that's what you do initially. You work with that. What are our limitations in terms of budget? How much money you're working with? What are the risks involved? What are the things we need to deliver? Then you define your schedule, okay? And there's various scheduling tools which we'll cover in the slides that follow. But then you define your schedule, okay? Once your schedule is defined, and your schedule simply states by which time, in terms of date, it's very specific in terms of the date and number of days, by which time a particular deliverable or milestone must be delivered. And then you do the work, but also at the same time, while you're doing the work, you monitor the progress against the original plan. And I said that earlier, that whenever you're doing the project, you always monitor against the original plan to see if you are deviating or not, okay? And obviously, if there are no problems or no slip-ups or none of the risks identified actually occur, then you get a finished product, okay? For some reason, if you get the unfinished product, then you go back and finish the work. If you're facing serious problems, okay? If you do the work and then you monitor against your original plan and you find that you're actually kind of deviating, then you face serious problems, okay? In terms of delaying the overall time of the project. Now you either can replan the project altogether or initiate your initial risk mitigation strategies that you had developed here at the beginning, okay? So this is a typical flow process. So project scheduling is referred to as making a decision on how the project will be broken down into several tasks. Project scheduling is also specifies how the tasks are executed, and that is achieved through the use of estimating calendar time for each task and efforts required to complete each task. Hardware and software resources must be estimated, and the suggestion on the individuals to work on the task must have been identified. You have to be really good because the estimation requires experience. So you can't underestimate a particular task in terms of software. It's just going to be a recipe for disaster. So this is one of the tools, obviously, that we use for breaking down the projects into smaller deliverables. You can see we have deliverable 1, deliverable 2, deliverable 3, and under each deliverable, there's going to be sub-activities that we need to do in order to achieve it, okay? And this is the WBS, the Work Breakdown Structure tool. And there are other tools out there, which is the calendar-based tools, okay? The Gantt chart is one example of them, where you actually see the bars, and there is the tasks on the left-hand side, and you actually see the dates at which how long each task would actually take. And we have our activity networks, which is also known as PERT, okay, which shows us the duration of each task and so forth. So agile planning. Agile methods of software development are iterative approaches where the software is developed and delivered to customers in increments. Unlike plan-driven approaches, the functionality of these increments are not planned in advance, but is decided during the development. The decision on what to include in an increment depends on the progress on the customer's priorities. The customer's priorities and requirements change, so it makes sense to have a flexible plan that can accommodate these changes, and we already know why. So there are different techniques at which we can use to estimate this cost of software. So organizations need to make software efforts and cost estimations. There are two types of techniques that can be used to do this, okay? And we have the experience-based techniques. You've done it so many times, you know that for this particular project, this is how much time is going to be taken in terms of person hours. So this is how much we should price it, okay? So the estimate of a future effort requirement is based on the manager's experience of past projects and application domain. Essentially, the manager makes an informed judgment of what the effort requirements are likely to be. Then we also have the algorithmic cost modeling, and it's an approach by using an algorithm and a particular formula. So this one is computed where you put in certain attributes about the product you are building, maybe the size of it, and size in terms of number of lines of code. Maybe also provide the job description of the people who are going to be working on the project, how experienced they are, and you just provide it with additional attributes about the software, and then it obviously computes in terms of an algorithm the estimate of how much this is most likely to cost. Okay, so we have this constructive cost modeling tool, which you also refer to it as COCOMO, and it is a procedural cost estimate model for software projects. Well-documented independent model, which is not tied to any specific software vendor. So COCOMO is part of the industry standards. Anybody can use it. It's not an invention by any software vendor which says this is our tool and we're only going to use this tool, okay? It has a long history from initial version published in 1981 through various institutions to COCOMO 2. So it has changed, you know, it has gone through this critique process and it has been refined. And that's why we have COCOMO version 2. So COCOMO 2 takes into account different approaches to software development, such as reuse. So the previous versions of COCOMO, the early versions of it, did not take into account that developers may also do reuse in the process, which can significantly impact on the cost of the software, because we're not going to build a component from scratch. We're going to be using it from another party. The last concept we're going to cover is the different forms or types of COCOMO estimates. So there's an estimate based on the number of application points. So here you're using COCOMO to estimate based on the number of applications we are going to be integrating together. So if we are building a system, remember a system is when you're going to be integrating multiple applications together. Then we use this one in terms of COCOMO, we use number of application points, okay, to estimate the cost of developing the software. Then we also have number of function points. Here, we estimate the cost of software based on the number of features the software will have. Okay, so we prioritize these features and requirements, and we also number them to say, okay, this has 100 features. These are the ones that are going to cost more, and these are the ones that are going to cost less. But you put a price into each feature, and then you get your overall price for the software. So it's based per feature. Then number of lines of code reused or generated. Okay, so here we estimate based on the concept of reuse. We may have code that we write ourselves, but certain code may be reused from external parties. So we give a separate price for those that we want to write ourselves, and then also the cost of purchasing the reused components. Okay, and then lastly, you can estimate the cost of a software based on the number of lines of code. So to say we wrote 30,000 lines of code to achieve this software, and then you maybe say 1 rand per line of code, something like that. Okay, so it's estimating based on the number of lines of code in the source code. So in conclusion, this study unit, we talked about project planning, which is it is crucial to have a thorough understanding of which sections in the project need to be included in the project plan. So we talked about the project plan document itself and the relevant sections that it covers: introduction, schedule, and people, the project structure, organization structure, and so forth. Project planning takes place at 3 stages, namely the proposal stage, during the project, the startup, and periodically throughout the project. Okay, so we have a proposal, then we have the startup or initial activities of the project. We still need to refine the project plan there. Then it also, based on which, if you're being plan driven or you're being agile, it changes along the way, this document. Development companies price the software using the pricing to win concept, which we said can be looked at as unethical, but that's just the way people actually do it. Pricing to win concept ensures that the development company is aware of the customer's expectation, and then they develop a software which meets the customer's need or expectation as at an affordable rate or price. Okay, so that is study unit 5. It's basically an extension of the unit we covered previously, which is project management, and it focuses specifically on this concept of project planning. Okay, so let me just stop the recording.